Hi, this is Nathaniel with Beginner Food, and today we're going to be talking about tips that I wish I knew before I started using a sous vide. But before we jump in, go ahead and like and subscribe, and let's start talking about the tips. All right, so our first tip is going to be about bag types. So when you're sous videing, you're going to be putting a bath of water here along with your food inside of a plastic bag. And you've got a lot of options. You can use a Ziploc bag, you can use a freezer bag, you can use vacuum sealed bags, and they even have special silicone bags that are made specifically for sous vide. Now, for your first time doing this, you're probably not going to want to invest in specialty bags, so we recommend using just a good old Ziploc freezer bag. The heavy duty ones where you can see that they're sealed because they have a red and a blue line that will turn purple when it's sealed together. So those are the ones we recommend for getting started. They're plenty good for sous videing steaks and chicken and vegetables, and they'll definitely take you through pretty far. The next tip that we want to talk about is water test and whether or not your bag is going to be waterproof. So one of the most annoying things that happens when you sous vide is you are cooking your food and it takes an hour. So you go into the other room, you come back and your bag is full of water. And rather than a nice juicy steak, you've made a really poor soup. So what we want to make sure that we're doing is always making sure our bags are waterproof. And if you're using vacuum bags, this is really obvious because the vacuum bag won't actually seal if there's a hole in it. If using any other kind of bag, you're going to want to do a water test. And there's two ways to do that. The first one is to put air in the bag, put it under the water, and squeeze. No bubbles, you're airtight. Bubbles, throw the bag away, don't put any food in it. You're going to end up making soup, not dinner. The other way to do it would be to fill the bag with water first. You don't even have to do it in the bin. Just fill it up with water in your sink and just hold it up. If you see water coming through the bag, same thing. You know that your bag has a hole in it. Don't use that one for sous vide. So, number one, put it into the water, squeeze for bubbles. Or two, fill it with water, squeeze, and water comes out. Either way, that'll tell you whether or not you can use that bag for sous vide. The next tip I want to talk about is double bagging. So there's a few cuts of food that are sharp. So you think like a bone-in ribeye steak. You're doing baby back ribs or beef ribs, short ribs. Anything that might have a bone on it has a chance to puncture your bag. And so one layer of plastic, one layer of vacuum seal may not be enough. And so a lot of times we're going to want to double bag those. So if you do get a small puncture on the inside, there's still a barrier between your food and the water. So anytime you've got bones or sharp ends, we do recommend you double bag your food. All right, let's talk about weighing your bag down. So if you have odd-shaped food, same thing. Ribs can be a little bit odd-shaped. A lot of steaks could be odd-shaped. If you're doing like a rack of lamb, very odd shape. There's a chance you're not going to be able to get all the air completely out of the bag, even with a vacuum sealer. It might not work. And so when you put it into the water, it's going to want to float. And if it floats up to the top, you're not going to get good circulation around the food, and it's not going to cook evenly. So you're going to want to weight your bag down. And you can do this basically by taking anything sterile and kind of heavy and actually putting it into the bag with your food when you cook it. So one thing that like we use is I have like a mortar and pestle. I can actually just put that in the bottom of the bag and then seal it, and now the bag's actually weighted down. So even if there's a tiny bit of air in the bag because the food is a weird shape or because you double bagged and there's always a little bit of air between the double bags, it'll weigh it down to the bottom of your water bath. So anytime that you've got floating food, consider weighing your bag down. All right, let's talk about container types. So there's two real container types most people are using for sous vide. One is going to be just a big old stock pot, so like a spaghetti pot, soup pot, anything just large and circular. The other one is going to be something a little bit more like this. So this is a bin specifically for sous vide. It doesn't have to be made for sous vide, but the big difference is they're rectangular. So they might be a little bit more square, they might be a little bit longer, but they're not going to be circular. All the pots that you see people use a sous vide in are circular. That's going to make a difference with what you can cook and how much space you have. Because what you don't want with a sous vide is your food right up against the inlets and the outlets for the circulation. So you don't want to block any of these with a bag. If you do, water's not going to come out, it's not going to circulate, and your food not going to cook evenly. So you want to make sure there's space by the actual circulator. When you put it into a round pot, you have a lot less space to fit things in there. You can definitely cook steak for one, maybe for two, in a stock pot, but it's unlikely you're going to feed a family of 4 in a stock pot. For something like that, we definitely recommend a bin. Put it over here, and you've got all this room here to put steak, full rack of ribs. You could put a whole chicken in here. You could put a small turkey in here, and you're going to be just fine, and you're not going to block the circulation on your sous vide. All right, let's talk about increasing the efficiency of your sous vide. So this one right here, this is an Innova. These come in varying strengths of how much water they can heat and how fast. But something that you can do with any sous vide to speed it up and to make sure that you're cooking fast is to preheat your water. So if I put cold water into this bin, it takes a lot of energy to heat that up to 130, 140, 150, 180 degrees. So I'm going to wait a long time before I can cook. So rather than putting cold tap water in, maybe I'm going to put hot tap water in here. That's going to be, most houses, around 120 degrees. Let's say that I want to cook even faster. I can fill this up halfway with tap water and halfway with boiling water. Now I'm going to be pretty much exactly at 130, 140 the moment the bin is full. So the sous vide itself is just maintaining the temperature, and we don't have to wait for the whole thing to come up to temperature. This is not being stressed out. The water's already hot. So preheating the water will definitely speed up how fast you can cook. Now, the other thing with efficiency on your sous vide is how long do you have to cook? If I'm cooking, a pork shoulder for 24 or 32 hours in my sous vide, I don't want to have to be heating that water against the elements, against a drafty house, against your air conditioning. And so a lid is going to be a really great investment for making sure that, again, all you have to do is keep the temperature steady. You're not fighting against it cooling off. The other nice thing about these dedicated bins is they're much better insulated than an aluminum pot. Aluminum pots are designed to allow heat to go in and out of them really quickly. That's how we boil water. They don't maintain heat very well. So if you're cooking for a really long time, you're going to want a lid, you're going to want something with a little bit better heat retention, and preheat your water, and that'll make sure that your sous vide lasts for a long time and you're not stressing out the heating element in there. All right, another tip that I really wish I knew when I started doing sous vide cooking was frozen food. You can do an awful lot of meal prep with a sous vide. You can basically take food out of your freezer, pop it into your sous vide, and within 2.5 hours, you will have dinner ready to go. All you have to do is hit a button, or if you got one of these ones with Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, you can just click the go button on your phone. And even from the office, you can get dinner ready. So yes, you can absolutely put frozen food in a sous vide and cook it from frozen. The only time where you're going to want to be careful about that is things like raw chicken, raw turkey. If it's too big, the inside may start growing bacteria prior to the rest of it coming up to temperature, in which case you're cooking it longer to re-sterilize. Anything that's 1-2 inches thick, you're going to be just fine. 2 to 3 hours, it'll be cooked. Next tip, seasoning in the bag. So you don't have to wait till your food is out of the sous vide to season it. In fact, we highly recommend you season food in the bag. When you season food in the bag, your food is cooking in that seasoning. real slowly. So if you want to throw some rosemary in there, you want to throw some butter in there, even just some salt and pepper, it's going to be cooking in that for hours. So you're going to get better flavor penetration. You're going to get better dispersion of those flavors while it's cooking than waiting till the end. Especially when you're doing things like beef or pork that have a lot of fat, any fat-soluble flavors. So you think like garlic, you think like if you're putting ginger in there, if you're putting any spices in there, that's a really good way to get better infusion of flavor into your meat. Alternatively, if you're doing fish, really delicate thing where you want delicate herbal flavors like maybe a rosemary or a dill that are going to get damaged during high heat cooking. Put those in the bag while it's cooking and allow it to kind of steep in that flavor to infuse your food while it's cooking. So definitely flavors in the bag, let it cook with that, and you'll get a much deeper, richer flavor in your food than just if you did it at the end. All right, and then the final thing that I wish I knew before I started sous videing was that you have to finish your food when it comes out. It makes it taste a lot better. So you can just pop it out of the bag and eat it straight. It's totally safe to eat, but it's not the prettiest and it doesn't have the best mouthfeel and you won't get quite as much flavor as if you sear it. So to finish your food off, you're still gonna wanna hit it with something like cast iron, maybe a couple minutes on the grill, broil it in the oven, get a little bit of crust on the outside of your food and it will taste just amazingly better. I mean, you're gonna get so much more flavor out of your sous vide and your cooking. The only tip I have around that is make sure you dry off. So pat down the food when it comes out. You don't want any liquid, any water on the food because when there's water on the food and you try to sear it, you're actually just gonna be boiling that water off first. And so you're steaming your food, you're not searing it. It's going to cap at 212, not 500 in terms of how hot it is. You want it hot. So you want this pan screeching hot, you want your grill screeching hot, you want your broiler all the way up, and you want the heat to go into the food, not into the water. So pat your food down when it comes out of the sous vide, and then do your sear, and you'll build up some great flavor and some great texture for your next meal. All right, well, those are some of the tips that I wish I knew before I started using a sous vide. I'm Nathaniel with Beginner Food. Thanks for watching.